So I used to start this workshop with a cartoon, which I have decided I don't like the imagery of, so I don't do that anymore. But it was essentially somebody standing outside on the ledge of their building, and somebody says, "What's going on?" And that person says, "Oh, I'm going to get some feedback from my boss." And then the split screen, somebody else is doing the same thing. And the question, "What's wrong?" "Oh, I have to give feedback." I mean, the honest truth is feedback is challenging. It is challenging to give, and it is challenging to receive. And I think that there is a special kind of resilience all its own, which we'll call feedback resilience. The ability to ground yourself in the moment, take a deep breath, and hear what's being said, or give feedback yourself, or respond in the moment to the feedback that you're hearing. I think that it's a really unique kind of resilience. Because many of the other things we've talked about, there is often time to walk away and think it through, right? You realize you need to have a conversation and you plan it and you practice it, but feedback is in the moment. You're giving it or you're receiving it, and it's in the moment. And so I think it's a very unique kind of resilience that requires some immediate grounding. Feedback, can be very formal, like a performance review. It can be very informal. You're walking out of your group meeting and someone says, "Hey, want to give you a little bit of feedback about your slides." It can be spoken, right? I mean, very, very often, but let's be honest. Sometimes you ask a question and somebody rolls their eyes or shrugs their shoulders, and you've just gotten some unspoken feedback about your question. At least that's what it seems like in the moment. Feedback is essentially some information about your current behavior. And if delivered well, it should be with the goal of helping you continue or modify. You're doing something well, keep doing it just like that. You're learning a skill and showing, competency, keep going in that direction. Or, whoa, you're off base, right? You need to rethink the way you do this. People talk about positive and negative feedback. I think that that is a simplification, and I would like to ask you to consider three kinds. Appreciation, which is done to elicit more of the same. Okay, hopefully specifically, not just great talk, thanks, but that was a great talk because of these three things that I encourage you to continue doing. How clear your slides were, how much you set the stage with a strong introduction, how you paused and handled questions. So appreciation feedback is you are on the right track, keep going. Then there's coaching feedback. There's a much better way to do this, okay? Here's what I suggest. Rather than organizing for your patient visit this way, I'd like you to consider doing it that way. Your notebook, here are some things you're doing right, but here are some things I suggest you change. A sort of coaching feedback. And then there's evaluation. Here's where you stand. Done sometimes upon renewal, done for graduate students when they have committee meetings. In many workplaces, there's an annual required evaluation, pretty formal. Here's where you stand. Now, in general, in any moment, we can be going from appreciation to coaching. And sometimes you think you're going to have a casual interaction with someone and they say, there's a lot to talk about. And suddenly it becomes a much more meaty evaluation. There is a book that I highly recommend. I think I probably have enough for everyone who's sitting in the room. Thanks for the Feedback by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. I think that it is a very, very good read for both how to receive feedback effectively, but also as you think about giving feedback, whether that be to someone you are mentoring and supervising, to someone in your life at home that you need to give feedback to, or whether it is to give feedback to your PI across a hierarchy, I think the book points out a lot of great skills. This morning, when my wife came down, we chatted a little bit, and then I made a request for her not to do something. I said, I need to sort some stuff out, so please don't pay this particular bill. And I think instead of hearing that as a simple fact, she thought there was an underlying message about money and the bill, and she started answering with very long explanations of things and possibilities. And I'm like, no, it's really just about waiting till Friday to pay the bill. And instead of giving that feedback sort of calmly, it came with a side of snark, right? And instead of it all just de-escalating, suddenly both of us were upset about nothing. So giving and receiving feedback is very fraught. Little things can become big things. Big things can suddenly shrink in size when we communicate about them effectively. And so I think this book and the material here and the discussion that you will all have moving forward, hopefully you'll come to the groups next week. I think all of it is important because we need feedback pretty much for everything. This slide could go on and on and on. Where we stand, we want to know what we're doing well, what our strengths are, how to grow them, what's expected of us, what's not going so well. We want to hear about what others prefer, what they want or what they need. So they have to give us feedback, sometimes about simple things like, here's how I'd like to arrange my day, sometimes about really complicated things. If we want to improve and make helpful change and get ahead and sort out what's coming next for us, we need regular input and feedback. And you could just keep going on and on. We all need feedback to know our place in our work and in all of our friend circles and family circles and communities. We need to give feedback so that others know where we're at, what we need, what we'd like to see change, right? Essentially, to get ahead in work and life, we need feedback. So if it's so important, why is it so very hard? And the honest truth is, at its core, it's hard because we are human and we want to be liked and appreciated. When we connect with someone positively, it's like we grow in the moment, right? We feel good about ourselves and our place. And that is a big part of being in all of these communities. It is really natural to feel defensive when we're challenged or critiqued. We're misunderstood, right? This morning, it was really a simple misunderstanding about what was underlying my comment, right? Yet because of defensiveness, even though we've been together a long time and we've done that dance before, right? It was hard to let go of that in the moment. Another reason why this is so hard is I think feedback is often delivered poorly. Maybe I shouldn't say often, I'll just say sometimes, but most of us haven't had a whole lot of training in how to give feedback. We don't practice, we don't get feedback on our feedback or sort of meta feedback, right? So there's not a lot of training or a lot of practice, and very often we don't have the best role models. So we've watched a lot of people give feedback in frustration. We are all multitasking. I think this morning, if computer screens weren't up and phones weren't out, probably this whole conversation would have been different. So we're distracted. Time feels tight. We all have different styles. And as a result of that, we've been on the receiving end of poor feedback. We've learned some habits that aren't especially helpful. If the receiver likes to be liked, so does the giver, right? So there's, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to stress them out. I don't want to do anything that makes their struggle even more. In addition, because of stress, because of all of the lack of practice, the lack of training, a lot of times feedback comes with sarcasm, frustration, or anger, right? A side of snark, right? Just a little bit of an edge to it, whether that's tone or actual words or body language. Many extroverted people, when they're nervous, repeat themselves. And since about 50% of all humans have a preference for extroversion, a lot of people repeat themselves when they give feedback. So the first time you hear it, it might land just well, but when it's said a second time, you start to wonder, why did they say that again? And when it comes a third time, now you're really feeling unappreciated and maybe under attack. We tend to exaggerate. You never do this. You always do this. We tend to catastrophize, right? It was horrible what happened, right? Everyone is wondering why our lab doesn't do controls, right? So there's some exaggeration and inaccuracy that comes along with it. And sometimes the message can be pretty indirect or unclear. Somebody will make a comment about, oh, scientists have to work really hard. Well, are they telling you a specific message or just making a generic comment? Or unclear. Everything's going well. Here are the things that I really appreciate. Oh, by the way, you got to fix this. And it doesn't seem like as big of a deal. Many of us learn this idea of a good, bad, good sandwich. Say something nice, then give some critique, then end with something nice again. And that might work occasionally in some times, but it's really hard to know where's the clear message here. The two ends of here's what's going well or what's in the middle. So there can be very indirect and unclear messages. It is also very hard, even when feedback is delivered well, to hear critical feedback about something we care about a lot and something that is a part of our highly valued self. So I'll borrow from home again and say, I am the cook in the family. I put a lot of care into thinking about what I cook, making things people like, wanting everyone to enjoy the food. And I spent a long time, years ago actually, trying to get Brussels sprout recipes to work. And I tried a bunch of ways, and I finally felt like I really nailed it. And I brought out the Brussels sprouts recipe, the food, and I waited as I think then my son was still living at home, as Wonder and Ren were eating it. And I felt like I finally got it. They weren't bitter, they weren't mushy, they weren't burned. Like all the issues we'd had, I'd resolved. How are they, right? I just asked this simple question, how are they? And I get back, it'd be better with nuts. And my feeling was really hurt. Actually, they are better with nuts, okay? They add a crunch. They are better with nuts. However, what I wanted in that moment was wow, you've really worked on this and improved it, and this isn't the worst vegetable ever, right? So if that was my singing, tonight we'll go celebrate a birthday and I will sing happy birthday off key for like the 1000th time. And someone will undoubtedly say, you should lip sync, not sing, and I'll just sing louder. Because it's not a part of my highly valued self to sing on tune. I could care less. But it is a part of what I care about in what I do in my family to cook for them and me. When you're at work and it really matters to you, getting critical feedback can be very, very painful. If we see ourselves as highly organized and together, and we had an oops moment and weren't very organized, it's hard for us to appreciate they were just pointing out a moment in time. We feel like, oh, this thing I value about myself is suddenly under attack. So we are human. And as a result of that, it is very challenging. When your stress goes up, your ability to ground yourself goes down. The giver is sometimes stressed. The receiver is sometimes, maybe often stressed. And even positive feedback can be a challenge. If you grew up learning not to take space, not to brag, right? suddenly somebody telling you, oh, you did that well, can be very uncomfortable. So it's not just critical feedback and coaching feedback that can be challenging. It can be any type of feedback. So if we want to develop feedback resilience, we really need to learn some skills here, because to get ahead, we need to seek out, hear, and respond to the feedback we receive, and we need to give feedback that's important for others to help and support us. So let's talk about feedback resilience. I am going to borrow a lot from previous lectures. There is a logic to the order of things. And so you will hear themes like the cultural lenses and how we navigate hierarchy that I've echoed last session and previous sessions. So first of all, each and every one of us has a typical feedback or stress response. Right? Some people shrink and get quiet, and even though they have something to say, the words don't come. Some people lean into it and say things that they wouldn't normally have said. Some of us, in the moment, can't even listen, and we're listening instead to our own internal talk. We all have a typical stress response, somewhat unique for feedback. I had a student who, whenever he clicked his pen, that was like a sign to me that he was done, that I had gone too far, that we needed to break things up, take a break, give a pause, right? That was just his way. He had a lot of physical energy. Some people just say fine to everything, understood. Some people just nod their head yes, even though they disagree. So the giver thinks, oh, I got agreement on everything. So each and every one of you has your way of dealing with feedback. Our cultural lens. Will we tell hierarchy? No, you're not right. Do we think we are important, or the entire collective and group is important? And we talked about that a little bit in the assertiveness session. Our go-to cognitive distortions. If someone says, you need to keep working on your presentation style, do we hear, that was the worst talk ever, you will never get a job on that talk, right? So what cognitive distortions are running through our head? Like all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, minimizing, imposter fears. Oh, this is a message that I don't belong. So how we manage our cognitive distortions matters. In addition, our communication style and how we respond to the style of others has a big effect. And I'm going to give you a grid for communication styles that for me is one of the easiest to work with. There are many others out there, but I'm going to give you one to play around with. Feedback triggers. I'm going to talk specifically about 3 types of triggers in a little bit. And then finally, the way we regulate ourselves in the moment, the way we regulate on stress, our discomfort tolerance, our frustration tolerance, what happens when we become embarrassed or angry. And we've introduced that concept of tolerance and anger management and grounding ourselves in the moment to control the emotions that can drive the stories, right, and complicate behaviors, but we'll land on them again briefly at the end. This is a lot of self-awareness. We've talked a lot about tools for self-awareness, again, journaling and mindfulness, talking with really clear, supportive mentors and peers, friends and family. You have to be careful, because if somebody just wants to support you and just keeps saying, don't worry, you're all good, then the awareness doesn't grow. And many of us, as we look at our way of working in the world, appreciate that there's a time to speak with a counselor, a therapist, to address both our really adaptive skills in this regard, but perhaps some maladaptive skills we'd like to soften or let go. And we've talked about them a lot. So we're going to start with a little bit of self-awareness, and I just would like you to think of one word or two that describes your communication style. And Uli as always, helped me in making this work. Thank you very much, Uli. If I had to describe my communication style in one word, it would be, and we'll give everyone a moment to join Slido and go ahead and give us some responses here. Diplomatic, considerate, thoughtful, conscientious, overthought, indirect, casual, considerate, deferential, somewhat blunt, sarcastic, scattered, lots of interesting words here. Succinct, non-emotional, awkward, rambling. I certainly would pick that word now and again for myself. Sometimes I think you have to ramble to tell stories, but strengths overused become liabilities, right? And so we can be too rambly. Avoidant. So direct, considerate, and thoughtful are the ones that have been picked by most people, but there's all kinds of things here. Blunt, sarcastic, cautious, soft, wordy, scattered, non-emotional, anxious, defensive, accommodating. Lots of important words. All right, now I want you to pause while we let the last few people vote, because I use these moving forward. I think these are also really helpful for us all not to feel so alone, right? We all have a word that we pick, and then we look at it on the screen. We see somebody else's on the screen, and it's like a moment of, yeah. Or a moment of, oh, I'm not so alone. All right, I want to go another way. If you had to describe the communication style of your PI or some other boss or other person important to you at work, could be your day-to-day mentor, how would you describe their communication style? Mercurial, careful, firm, frenetic, honest, hurtful. Direct is showing up a lot again, but also indirect, right? Unhelpful, belittling, aggressive, confusing. Please keep going. These, I will tell you, that I use when I lecture PIs. I think it's really helpful for them to hear indirectly from students. And so I use what I learn here often to give them insight. You know, I ask them, do you really mean to be viewed this way, right? I think we could ask ourselves the same thing, right? Is our style effective all the time, some of the time, most of the time, not very often? I'm glad to see kind, supportive, encouraging, considerate, and careful. I wish I didn't see passive aggressive. Critical, you know, that's an interesting thing because critical and kind could really work. Critical and unkind could really make it very hard to learn. So it's interesting as we think about putting these together as well. So some useful things there. Developing feedback resilience is a bit about understanding your style, and it is a bit about understanding the style of others and being able to hear the information in the midst of all of the style issues around the delivery. So thank you all for all of that. So that's pretty cool, right? All of those words, but not much of a model to work with. So I'm going to deliver all of you a model. We're going to keep using, as we move through the model, the Slido. So those of you online and those of you in the room, keep your phones out. So I'm going to borrow from, all right, so remember last time we met, we talked about conflict grids and we put on one axis, focus on yourself and the task, and on the other one, focus on the other party. Same thing here. They use different language, but it's essentially a grid an XY grid. Responsiveness is the degree to which you are perceived by others as attending to their needs in the interaction. Whether you ask questions, whether you listen, whether you engage with them. Responsiveness. Notice here, it says perceived by others. Sometimes I'm talking to somebody and I think I've given them plenty of time to share. I've shown them that I care, but because I'm very extroverted and to me, a 2-second pause feels like a 2-minute pause, they think Sharon didn't give us any time, right? Sharon didn't give me a moment to share. So it's perceived by others, and we're going to put responsiveness on the y-axis. We're going to put assertiveness, the degree to which you are perceived by others as attempting to prevail and get your way, on the x-axis, okay? So this is how much you are perceived as being very blunt and direct, okay? And responsiveness, how open you are to questions, to hearing, to supportive conversation about how it's going. Think about all the different words in those 2 word clouds. Now, there's in the book, one set of language used around this style, but online, another set. So I used both. So high on assertiveness, low on responsiveness is a style called the driver style or the directive style. Okay, and then you go up. High in assertiveness and responsiveness is expressive and emotive. Now go low on assertiveness, but high on responsiveness is an amiable or supportive style. And low on both, low on assertiveness, low on responsiveness is a reflective style, also called an analytical style. Now, none of us use only one of these styles. If you can think of it as a continuum. Some people fall very far on one side or the other and tend to use one of these styles much more than the other. Many of us use both, or many, or we're sort of in the middle, and it's hard to tell between 2 of the styles. Okay, so look at a little bit of the descriptions here, and we're going to start with the analytical or reflective. These are individuals who tend to be very internal and contained. They're outwardly not very emotional. They like time to prepare. They like agendas for meetings. They will often hold their opinion back. So if you go to a supervisor and say, I really need your suggestions about my slide deck, right? And you run in and, oh, here, let me show you, right? They need time to prepare. They often hold back their opinions. And even when they give an opinion, it's pretty measured, right? It's not a really clear, look, this is the best way to do it. It's, well, here's an option. Here's what I think. These types of communicators, when this is somebody's dominant style, it can feel like you hardly know them, right? They're not very outwardly expressive. They're not sharing a lot. You're needing to go to them, right? So this is an introverted style of communication. And we're just going to slide over and make a contrast for the driver and directive. These are individuals who get right to the point. They lack outward warmth, but you might see a whole lot of irritation and frustration, right? And very direct, strong language. They interrupt a lot during conversations. They are typically not very good listeners. They like to control the agenda, right? So a meeting starts and you want to, can I please interrupt and give you some feedback? No, let me finish, right? So you might not get a whole lot of time in that meeting. They can make really quick decisions, and it can be sometimes challenging to get them to look at them again. So an analytical person will hold their opinions back. A driver will put their opinions right out there, right? So you go with the same question of, can you take a look at this? And you're hoping for some give and take and some questions and whatever. You go, oh, do it this way. Make that change, this change, that change. See you later. All right. So that's that style. As you're hearing these, think about you, think about the people that you work with. Now we're going to go up. and we're going to look at the expressive or emotive communicator. These are people who talk with a lot of body language and emotion, very fast pace. They will jump in and control the agenda, control the flow of discussion. Here, let me do that for you. They also are not the best of listeners. They encourage a lot of informality. Some people said their communication style was informal, and maybe it partially falls in this category. These are individuals who might be totally chatty. How are things going? What'd you do this weekend? Here's what I did. Did you watch that TV show? Yeah. Let me tell you about my vacation. Let me tell you about my kid. Let me tell you about this and that. And you think, wow, we're friends. And then suddenly they say, and here's what you're not doing well. And they get going. So it can be one of those very unclear messages. They tend to share emotions and feelings and like it to be shared back. And if you're happy to share, it could go well. But if you prefer not to share, right, they're looking for this bonding. Remember, they're high on responsiveness. So they're trying to connect. The last style is the amiable or supportive style. These are individuals that really care, and it's easy to reach out. How are you doing? They listen attentively. They want to connect with you using a lot of warmth, but they don't like to use power. So while they might be available to chat with you a lot about how things are going, they might not be so likely to give you the critique that you need. Or they soften the message so much that you don't get a sense of how important it is, right? And so you see the warmth, interpret the warmth, and miss the message that came along with it. These are individuals who make decisions very much based on people. You know, how's it going to make you feel, as opposed to what needs to be done. Now, each of us tends to prefer one or two of these. It would be beautiful if all of us could assess what's needed and sort of adjust our communication style, but nature and nurture, we have a preference, right? So I see myself very, very much up there in that expressive emotive category, but I know at times, whether I like it or not, it can be perceived as driver or directive. Sometimes a student comes and I can really channel a whole lot of warmth and step back and be supportive. And boy, I can almost never do that analytical or reflective. Really hard for me to sit quiet and listen. So each of you, as you develop awareness about your style, might appreciate that there's easy ones for you to use and harder ones for you to use. There are three really big take-home messages to that style grid. And the first is each and every one of us have our go-to or default styles. One or two, some people see themselves in more than two, but most people typically say, well, here are the dominant ones for me. There are benefits and liabilities to all of these styles. There is no good or bad style here. Each of these works. Each of these can get in the way. Strengths overused become liabilities, but there is no good, better, or best style. But it is really key to keep in mind, strengths overused become liabilities. So the third take-home message then is that what we want is to be aware of our style, that we stretch to use other styles as appropriate, and that we develop the ability to adjust our style to work with the style of others, okay? So we have to accept, just because we have a preferred style, not everybody has the same preferred style, and the goal is to understand this model and use it for more effective communication. And I'll give you an example myself. So I remind myself now often that it would be good to bring my energy down and listen some. Let me borrow a little bit of a reflective style in the moment, okay? It's useful to understand these styles so that you can both adjust yours and respond to others. And I'll give another example right there. So if there's quiet, it sort of makes me worried, and I fill the quiet really quickly. But I have a lot of really talented analytical communicators in my group. And if I don't sit with quiet a little bit, I won't hear their good ideas. So it's not just that I adjust my style, it's that I appreciate theirs. So there are strengths of each of these styles. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on this, right? There are clearly benefits to each of these styles. But strengths overused become liabilities. So you're a direct communicator, a driver communicator. That can be really good. You say what you mean, you get it out there, but taken too far, you could be looked at as an abrasive person who makes decisions without seeking input, alienates others, only looks out for themselves. An expressive, emotive communicator. You're so busy trying to connect and raise the energy and excite everybody that it turns out you're not a very good listener. You're sort of impatient. You're impractical because in a 10-minute conversation, you threw out 20 ideas and nobody knows which ones to do next. An amiable, really nice person, right? But you avoid conflict at all costs. You don't give critical feedback. People can't grow and learn. And then analytical communicator, right? It's really sometimes hard to know what's in your mind, right? And people can think not a team player, often because it takes so long for ideas to come out. People will say pretty standoffish, really has to perfect everything before they speak. So your strength, right, can be perceived as a liability or be a liability if you take so long to speak up that the opportunity has passed. All of these styles have huge pluses. And all the discussion out there about which one is better and which one has more strengths and which one goes with strong leaders, I think all of that is missing the mark. There are remarkably strong leaders who go-to style fit all of these. But the strongest leaders are aware of their style, work to stretch as much as they need to at times, and work to adjust to the style of others. So I'd like you now to just think a moment, what is your go-to style? The one you're most likely to use. And I am going to guess that some people are going to say, well, it depends, because at work it's a hierarchy, so I stuff myself down. I want you to think about work for right now. After you go ahead and vote, I'd like you to think for a moment whether you have a completely different style at home and in the community and why that might be. I mean, I think we all know why that might be, but it's worth reflecting on unique messages you might have gotten around that. So a lot of analytical and reflective style, amiable and supportive. Driver directive is down at the bottom. And just pause for a moment and ask yourself if that is a result of sort of masking who you are because of the work environment and sort of code switching between work and home. All right. And now we're going to do the same thing on the flip side. Not what you are, but what do you have the hardest time working with? Oh, I got to go again. Sorry. It works a lot better to have them embedded, but I have to remember to move forward. So at the bottom of what style you were was driver. Now it's at the top. We'll just let some more. We had about 80 or so people vote in the first one, so we'll let this go up. I always show this to PIs, and it always generates a huge discussion. I almost think this particular kind of work often selects for driver directive communicators. And yet it is a really unhelpful communication style in the workplace, unless it is really toned down, smoothed out, and buffered. In some ways, a direct communicator, who can sit down and say, I have some challenging news and I'd like to really talk it through with you, that could be a real gift. But somehow, because of all the stress and the way it's delivered and all kinds of reasons, it's a really big challenge. It's often that we see expressives higher up than this, because the message can get lost, but so they are second, but a big drop down. In analytical reflective, sometimes it's interesting. I wonder whether that isn't a hardest because essentially there is no communication, right? So if you're worried about challenging communication, having no communication might feel pretty good. And I wonder if we reframe the question to get the mentoring you need, what style would be the hardest, which one you would all choose. So it's always interesting to look at this. But driver and directive is completely opposite. It's at the bottom of the style you use, and at the top of the style you have the hardest time working with. So I want you to extend this directly to people that you work with. Think about your dominant styles. What about your PI, other important people in the workspace? I want you to really start a little bit of journaling around those style differences, when they work, when they don't work, right? I just want you to start thinking about whether sometimes it isn't the message as much as the style, that the first initial challenge are style differences or style similarities, right? You're both reflective, so conversations feel so challenging. And then I want you to think about how you might manage up. By managing up, and I'm going to talk about that a lot in 2 weeks, what I mean is adjusting the way you engage with your PI to get the most out of that relationship. So how might you adjust to their style? Okay. If they're a reflective communicator, how might you seek out and get more feedback? If they are an emotive communicator, how might you get them to be more clear in the midst of all the energy coming at you? Feedback plays a big role in styles. And here what I did was sort of take the caricature of each style. Okay, so in their less than shining moment, what can you expect in getting feedback from somebody who's delivering it in a driver style, right? Or an expressive style, an amiable style, or an analytical style. These are exaggerated to some degree. I tried to pick things and really amplify them to think about, because as you think about receiving feedback from people using these different styles, I hope this will give you tools, right? So for example, the analytical may not take initiative to give feedback, so you're going to have to find ways to ask for it. They may need time to prepare in advance. And you might be I like to knock on the door and bring up what's in my mind right away. And then you're going to be disappointed. On the other side, we'll just go up and diagonal. Expressives may get easily off topic. So maybe you're going to need a bring us back sentence, right? To say, I really want to make sure I hear everything you have to say. We've gotten off track a little, right? You may need some tools. With a driver, you're going to need to have short responses, ways to say, can I share my perspective, right? So in each of these cases, you're going to need some strategies. And so I'm not going to go bullet by bullet, but in the discussions, that's one of the biggest goals that we will have, is to help you have a set of strategies for each of these. And in fact, because we think that's so important, we've listed a lot of them here, right? Short responses, understood, will do, may I clarify, right? That's not going to work so well with an amiable. They're going to want a little bit more discussion. right? So you might need to say, I really appreciate you giving me this feedback. It's really going to help me on my next presentation. Can we talk a little bit more about? Completely different energy, completely different strategy. All right. This seems hard, but there is a lot of science to say that within respectful boundaries, if we mirror a small degree the style of the person opposite us, the conversation goes better. So if we're talking with an analytical, we want to bring our energy down. If we're talking with an expressive, we want to lean forward and bring our energy up and connect with them. Now, across a hierarchy, that is a lot harder to do than across a peer-to-peer interaction. But even across a hierarchy, it often can help. So if somebody is a bit of a driver communicator and you're getting an intense message, you don't want to yell back, but a bit of a firm, I'm sorry, I have a different perspective I'd like to share, could help. Now, you might get a sign, okay, now they think you're being disrespectful and you'll want to back off again. That, a key message is the ability to ground yourself and adjust in the moment. Because if you're all wrapped up in the style, you can't help but ignore the message. And the goal of the feedback is to learn, right? And if you can't hear the message, you can't learn. Now, the flip side on all of this is imagining giving feedback. And while it seems like you are on the receiving end much more than on the giving end, two things. You are all leaders within your research groups, developing skills in mentoring others, giving feedback to peers and colleagues. And second, it is really critical at times to give your PI feedback. So here are some strategies in giving feedback. If you've noticed, driver and expressive, watch your intensity, slow down, right? Expressives do a lot of repetition, right? Sometimes now I literally say to myself, I think you said that already, right? Let's avoid saying that a third time. If you're analytical, right, an analytical communicator, and you've not sat down with your summer intern, right, they are filling in the blanks. They are imagining what you have to say, and they may be completely off. So you'll want to make sure to start the week with, have I given any feedback? Right? Do I want to make sure that I give some feedback this week? Now, if you notice at the bottom in each of these, the last bullet is reconnect later. One of the worst things about feedback are the stories we tell ourselves afterward. Well, that really didn't go well. They really don't appreciate me. I'm not doing well. I'm probably not going to get promoted, whatever. We fill in the story, often in a catastrophizing way, and we tend to avoid each other. One of the most important things that can help when feedback is challenging is the effort to reconnect later. And again, across a hierarchy, it is best if your PI does that, right? It's best if the person with more power in the relationship makes an effort to reconnect, but it also can be helpful from your perspective, even if it's just a quick walking by and saying, hey, I just, that was a tough conversation. I just wanted to connect and say thanks, or connect and I'm thinking about it, right? Or maybe you need time, but you stay home for days to avoid. Going in and nodding and saying hello is a way of starting that reconnection. So those are a set of slides that give you a lot of awareness of issues in communication style around feedback and such. I said another thing that you really need is an understanding of triggers, and particularly feedback triggers. So feedback triggers are a common reason why we respond negatively to feedback. I actually think one of the first is the style issues that come into play, but I think feedback triggers are way up there. So you can think of a trigger as something that evokes a strong emotional response, maybe even more than is needed, right? So we get triggered by certain things, and in feedback, there are three types of triggers. truth triggers, relationship triggers, and identity triggers. And triggers push us towards an emotional response so we can't focus and hear and process the feedback. So I'm going to talk first about truth triggers. That's when we question the accuracy of the feedback. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about some strategies for dealing with truth triggers. So first of all, ignore every time you hear always and never. Humans exaggerate. Stories grow over time. You're never on time is probably not accurate, right? And you could probably come up with examples of when you were. Focus on the general accuracy, not the absolute accuracy of words like always and never. Okay, that can allow you to bring down your energy. Also, sometimes it's good to point out, well, at times I am on time. Sometimes it becomes a sort of side skirmish, right? So you're so focused on they said never, and you're giving examples and trying to defend that comment when you would be much better off hearing the rest of it and talking about different areas. So focus on general accuracy. The second thing is sometimes there are complete and total inaccuracies in feedback. There is third-hand information, second-hand information, misunderstandings, all kinds of wrong assumptions. If some part of the feedback is accurate and some parts are not, try to literally put the inaccurate stuff aside for a moment, all right? Deal with the accurate part, right? Oh, I hear that you would like me to do this and this differently. Can we talk about that? Make sure you understand. Now, you might want to circle back and say, you know, you brought up that I didn't do that experiment correctly. I wanted to let you know that I was following a protocol that so-and-so gave me. I didn't appreciate that I should have checked about it, right? I'm not saying you totally let them leave on the table complete inaccuracies, but if you separate them, you can calm yourself down. Another thing is to just acknowledge that each of us has a different perspective of the situation, and empathy or just spending a moment trying to imagine their perspective can go a long way. So trainees are under a lot of stress. You have a lot to accomplish, whether it be getting in to the next step if you're a postbac, defending if you're a grad student and sorting out next steps, postdocs deciding where do I want to go, getting the experience that you need. You are all under a lot of stress. The honest truth is PIs experience a different type of stress. Non-tenure track PIs are very stressed about tenure. A PI who has a grant due soon is very stressed about publications. And so one situation can look really different based on what stress you are most focused on or what your needs are compared to the other party's needs. Now, the boss in general should do a good job of putting their perspective aside to hear yours. However, to really have the best relationships and get the most accurate feedback, it is helpful for you to be able to look at their side as well. So what is it that might be driving this response? What's going on? That does not forgive rude, uncivil, demeaning behavior. Okay, so I'm not introducing an out for people who deliver feedback in really demeaning ways. We have to all learn better feedback skills. But it can be helpful to pause for a moment and say what might their perspective be, right? So I'm thinking, well, another week or two on these experiments, not such a big deal. They're thinking I was hoping to have these data to take with me to a meeting, so they're a little hotter about it than I am. Okay, what can I do about that? When giving feedback, you should avoid using always and never. You should be especially careful about secondhand feedback and third-hand feedback. I think it is one of the worst things managers do. It would be so much better rather than saying, hey, I want to talk to you about X, to say, hey, I want to ask you about X. Just that alone could change the whole thing, right? And be open to hearing things that differ from your perspective. Those are a little bit of things about truth triggers. Now, relationship triggers are when we question or don't like or don't trust the person providing the feedback. And that is especially problematic when it is RPI. So if we don't have enough trust with RPI to believe that even if it's painful, there is some good intention behind it, then it's really hard to adjust. And it's why we end by talking about mentoring relationships, and why on the OITE website, there's about 8 pages on choosing the right climate for you, right? We all think this is about science, and it is about so many other things before science comes into play. But the honest truth is, sometimes I get feedback from someone, and the honest truth is, if it was delivered by somebody else, I would have heard it and agreed with it. But it was delivered by somebody that I either don't like or don't respect or don't think is really an expert, and I don't hear it very well. So it is about the person delivering the feedback. So I literally say to myself, if I felt differently about this person, would I feel differently about the feedback? And if I say yes, then I sit with the feedback. And if I say no, I don't believe this feedback is accurate either way, then I can decide, do I want to rebut it? Do I want to just hear it and say thanks for the feedback and move on? We don't have to take action on every bit of feedback we get. Depending on the hierarchy and where we're at and what it's about, sometimes we have to take action whether we want to or not, right? And that's just the reality of being in the workplace. Sometimes somebody gives us an opinion and we say, thanks for your opinion, and we move on. Sometimes I do just that. Sometimes, even though it was a relationship trigger, I have to acknowledge if it was delivered by someone else, I would have said, you're right. Here are my thoughts about how I'd like to change. The other thing about that, because we get feedback from people we don't like all the time or don't respect, I mean, that's just the reality of work, right? I now like to say, so let me just focus on the gain. What can I get out of this, right? And sometimes if you separate the person and you focus on the message, you're like, okay, this is going to help me at my next interview, or this is going to help me with my next collaboration, right? I just learned that it's a really bad idea to go talk to a collaborator without letting my PI know. And I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. And when I go to another group, I'm going to say, hey, do you want me to come to you before I share data with others, right? So let me separate it and just get the learning. The thing is, if you want to avoid relationship triggers, you really have to build trust. And if you mentor others, this is really important. But as a student, selecting a research group, if at the end of a rotation period you do not feel trust, it doesn't matter how good that science is. Because the only way to really grow and learn is to get critiqued and to hear critical feedback and be able to hear it. And the foundation for that is trust. Remember that there is task and relationship in everything we do. Task, getting what we want, getting work done. Relationship, essentially building a bridge with that person. Think about your relationship with your PI and other important people in your group as a bridge. Is it a rock solid bridge, totally pounded into the ground? Nothing is really going to make it sway a whole lot? Or is it literally a couple of rotted boards falling out of the ground? Is it swaying in the wind a lot or a little? Does it always sway or hardly ever sway? You have to have a good relationship to get feedback and grow and learn. And right around now, people are saying, well, if my PI did better, it would be easier for me. And I agree. And that's why we teach this material in depth to PIs. It's why universities have ombuds offices and conflict management workshops. It's why we are constantly harping on communication styles and tools, and how multiculturalism makes it more important that we're aware of that, right? So I fully agree that PIs really need to deliver feedback in ways that work, right? And they have to put time into building the relationship. But each of you means different things when you talk about a relationship, right? Some PIs think that means a lot of sharing, some think it means very little sharing, same for trainees, right? Some of you want a long discussion about what you did over the weekend. Some of you, it was a good weekend, bye. We all have different needs. But to really deal with relationship triggers means that we look a lot at that bridge and what's the status of how we get along, and making sure we find ourselves in workplaces that build a bridge in a way that we like to build a bridge. Now, the third type of feedback trigger is an identity trigger, and that is the identity, our identity, or the identity of the giver, or a combination of both makes the feedback especially uncomfortable or unpleasant or challenging for us. Now, one identity trigger we already touched on, and that is when the feedback touches on a deeply held way we see ourselves. If we really see ourselves as nurturing with patients and wanting to develop really, really great clinical skills, and we think we're on the way, and somebody says, I don't like the way you just handled that interaction with the patient, that's something that really matters. It's a deeply held view of ourselves. It's hard to take, right? And not just think nuts and Brussels sprouts. But there is another type of identity that I think is worth talking about, and I want to talk about the concept called attributional ambiguity. And that is when we are uncertain about whether the feedback we received was based on group membership or actually how we performed. So I am aware, because I'm at a meeting that's mostly men, right? I am aware of my status as a woman, and I get some feedback about being too aggressive. And I think, well, is that because I'm a woman and they were expecting something different than me, right? Or is that because I really was too aggressive? So attributional ambiguity. Is the feedback a valid response to my performance, or is it driven by a response to my group membership? And the literature is full of examples where attributional ambiguity occurs, and look at the list. Race and ethnicity, gender, especially women, but now I think over time in some environments, you can see it around men. Physically attractive individuals, overweight individuals, religious affiliation, individuals with physical or mental health issues, socioeconomic status, etc. It's about a lot of things, right? So did I just get critiqued because I have an accent, or did I get critiqued because I wasn't prepared for my talk, right? Did someone say I was disrespectful because I did something I really should reconsider, or because they had a response to my identity, something that they saw or that I had already showed to them? The thing about attributional ambiguity is it occurs for both positive and negative feedback. So it can be, am I getting this positive feedback because they feel sorry for me? They don't want to seem prejudiced. They're just sort of killing me with faint praise. It can occur for negative feedback. Am I getting this negative feedback because they have bias, whether it's unconscious or conscious? Are they acting on their prejudice, right? Are they responding to the performance or the person? Some ambiguity can temporarily buffer our self-esteem, right? So some attributional ambiguity. So we say, oh, they didn't really mean it. This is just a response to who I am, right? They gave me this feedback because of who I am. It had nothing to do with my performance. That does temporarily buffer our self-esteem, right? It can help us let go of some critical feedback that we hear. And sometimes we need to do that because there is attributional ambiguity, and it does happen. Again, all tied back to trust. The literature shows that the way to deal with attributional ambiguity is trust, that bridge, those relationships, right? Then we can pause for a moment and say, everything I know about this person, they care about me. They see me for who I am. They respect me for who I am. Let me try to learn from this feedback. Or it's even possible to go and say, I sort of feel that there's a little bit of bias in this feedback or a little bit of assumption about me because of X, Y, or Z. Again, it goes back to trust, which is why it is so ludicrous that leaders sit at meetings up at tables talking to people about picking grad thesis advisors or postdoc advisors and say, oh, choose the best place, the best scientist. It's all based on the science. We should say it is based on who will make you feel safe. Now, that's a lot harder to figure out than science, and it's probably why we don't say it, right? That is a hard thing, right? If you don't get to do rotations, it's almost impossible. And even with rotating like graduate students do, sometimes you land in the wrong place. So I think the thing is that attributional ambiguity can, if it's not addressed in a safe place, can really block any learning. And it can be an incredible trigger during feedback. If you are concerned that the feedback is about who you are and not what you did, it's almost impossible to learn from it. So if you think about it, there is so much swirling around us between the styles and our view of hierarchy and attributional ambiguity and the cognitive distortions in our mind and the cognitive distortions in their mind, right? That it is amazing that any of us can ever hear the words and learn from feedback. It is a really, really challenging thing. And trust is such a big part of it. I don't know that I think there is really a good way to tease out all of these elements. I think that in some ways we should view feedback. Maybe this isn't the best metaphor, but it's on my mind because I have a dentist appointment soon. I like my dentist, but I don't like going to the dentist. Ever, even when it's a pretty good, time. I don't know. There's just something about, I walk in and I'm a little stressed. And I wonder if we don't need to just accept that feedback is hardly ever going to be comfortable. And if somebody tells us everything is great, well, that might be nice to hear in the moment, but there's not much chance of learning in that moment. So a couple of questions that I have found have helped students as we've worked through painful feedback sessions. And one is, who is the person telling you this or telling me this? Reflect on the relationship. What is the status of it or the status of the bridge? Generally, do I just feel solid with this person? I know that they see me. I know that they care about me. So this didn't land especially well. Let me work through it. Or do we have to sit there and acknowledge, actually, it's not a very good relationship? Now, sometimes, and we'll discuss this a lot in the next unit, sometimes whether we acknowledge it's a bad relationship or not, we also acknowledge where we're at in our career doesn't allow for an immediate transition. So there's a lot of implication to that, right? When we land on, well, the honest truth is there's a lot of relationship trigger here, then we can get support to actually learn from it from someone else. It can be incredibly helpful to go to another committee member, right? Or a collaborator or someone in your branch to get some feedback. Another question, why is it uncomfortable to hear, right? And sometimes I can't really sort that out right at the beginning. It takes me sitting there a little bit, but what is it about it? Why? What parts are uncomfortable to hear? Sometimes that's a great way to sort of separate out. And I hear something and I'm like, well, that I really agree with. It's something I've been working on. I'd like to do better on. I am a pretty disorganized worker. I get a lot done, but it comes with a lot of disorganization. Sometimes it's really good to reflect on that, but I have to separate that from other parts of the feedback. And then questions about identity. How might my identity and the identity of the delivering party play into how I am feeling right now? Attributional ambiguity works both ways. The deliverer might feel attributional ambiguity while they're not listening to me because of my identity, right? Are they disrespecting me because they disagree with the message, or they disagree with me or find something about me to be a part of the issue. And if you notice, I use the words disrespecting me, because when we deliver a message and people push back at it, one of the first things we say is they're not listening because they don't respect me. So it gets personal really fast. And then one last one is their truth to the feedback or any part of the feedback. And I wanted to end by reminding people about boundaries, because without a doubt, there is feedback that is given that is inaccurate, in whole or in part. And sometimes we do have to set a boundary and just say, I heard you said it. I acknowledge that you said it, but I disagree, and I'm going to put that aside. Now, that can be risky when it comes from your boss, right? If it's a big thing. But even from our boss, we do not have to accept every bit of feedback that we get. We have a sense of who we are. We have a sense of how others see us that grows over time. And there are boundaries, both about how we will hear feedback, but also whether we will let it in, right? And carry it around for a long time. Emotions and feedback are another topic. We talked about styles and we talked about triggers, and we've had some grids here to look at, but we have to finally put that together with the fact that feedback causes discomfort. It can cause embarrassment, frustration, irritation, and anger. And just remember that emotions are important data points, right? We want to be aware of how we're feeling. We want to interpret it accurately, and we want to be able to regulate our emotions, so air. And time is our friend in this case. One of the things that I think would be really good as a rule in every research group and office is that either party has the ability to say, I'm feeling too much right now, I need to pause. Right? Sometimes maybe we only need a minute or two, and sometimes we need an hour or two, and sometimes we need an overnight cooling off period. But I think time is our friend. I wanted to just go through this a little bit around discomfort, embarrassment, etc. Right? When we feel uncomfortable, often it's I'm uncomfortable, I should stop. So someone is giving us feedback, I should just shut down and be quiet, right? But an alternate message is, this is uncomfortable and I still need to say what I need to say. That could be around giving feedback. The thought of giving this feedback makes my palms sweat, my mind race, my heart pound, my mouth dry out. The last thing I want to do is do this. Oh, all these messages are telling me stop. But actually the point is this matters and I need to go anyway. Embarrassment. People give us feedback and we get embarrassed, right? We want to look good in front of people who evaluate us. We want to look good in front of people we don't know. The other day, I tripped on the sidewalk. What is the first thing I did, right? I didn't worry about my stuff all over. I'm like, who saw me, right? Embarrassment is automatic. And if it's somebody who's judging us, someone who might write us a letter, someone who will renew us or not, embarrassment is even worse. So generally when we feel embarrassed, we want to hide. But, a better option would be, I wish this hadn't happened. I can't believe it did. I need to hear more. I'm not going to be able to hear more without some support. So let me listen now. And then I'm going to turn to all those people that I have built up into my resilience toolkit. Self-compassion matters a lot when we're getting feedback. None of us are perfect. I think the feedback deliverer often forgets that in the moment, right? The person giving the feedback about a mistake much of the time forgets they've made mistakes in the past as well. So self-compassion and appreciating that perfection doesn't exist is really important. Now, as we're starting to feel frustrated, irritated, or angry, very often the underlying message is I'm being treated poorly. And usually we have to do one of two things. I mean, if you think about it, it's really fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Some of us fight back. I should lash out and fight back. We raise our voice. Doing that in a hierarchical environment can be especially challenging. Or fawn. Fawn is when we agree to, oh, you're so right. I'm so wrong. I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. I'm sorry. It won't happen. But meanwhile, you haven't been heard. So an alternate of fight is, this is pushing my buttons. I need to avoid taking the bait and calm myself down. The message of that leads to fawn should be, I know I just want to agree right now, but I'm going to need to take a deep breath and say, can I please share my perspective? And it isn't that I can give you a message and an alternate for each and everything. It's that in the moment, you want to be able to start to tease this out. I am feeling under attack right now. What do I want to do? Actually, I'm just going to listen right now. Or I'm going to lean forward and say, I'm sorry, but this is getting too intense. Or I'm sorry, but you don't know all the details, right? We have to be able to decide, say something, don't say something, continue, don't continue. So I want to put all of this together into a model, and this also comes from the work of Stone and Heen. I really love this model. If you think about it, feedback occurs in 3 dimensions. In the present, what's going on right now. And this is the triggers and the emotions and the physical sensation and the distorted stories. This is everything happening to us in the moment, making it very hard to hear anything. But really, if we can manage those triggers, those emotions, all those messages, we can calm ourselves. And then what we want to do is learn about what happened to bring us to now, right? The past. We're getting feedback on something that happened in the past. Now, there is the data, what exactly happened, and the interpretation. The person giving you the feedback may have accurate data and inaccurate interpretation. Gives us a chance to help with the interpretation. They might have the wrong data, right? I wasn't late, actually. I was downstairs waiting for so-and-so to arrive. Next time I'll text, right? So it's both data and interpretation. So you're in the here and now. The issue is in the past, but the goal is improvement and change in the future, right? What should I do? What will we do differently moving forward? So the goal is to focus and calm ourselves in the present so we can hear and discuss what happened so that we can share and talk about what to do moving forward. We've talked a lot about grounding and dealing with stress in the moment. There are lots of workshops in the mental health series that talk about deep breathing and grounding and finding ways to slow down our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, deep breaths, releasing tension, just keeping in mind communication styles, right? Somebody is delivering a really energetic amount of feedback in an energetic way. That's just their style. Right? So maybe you just you sit back a tiny little bit and say, okay, it's going to come hard and fast from this person. Noting your distortions and your triggers, holding off, asking for time if you need it. One other thing that I have seen really work effectively when I have mediated between a student and a supervisor is thanking somebody for the feedback and acknowledging how challenging it was to hear it just seems to bring the energy down. First, it shows you appreciate, but second, it really shows your vulnerability, right? And one of the big things in working out relationships is people showing vulnerability to the right level, right? So you don't want to go on and on and on about how hard it is, but to say this really matters to me, so hearing this was challenging, can go a very long way. People like to be heard, right? So to say, I hear that I let you down because of what happened in cell culture, someone was heard, right? And a lot's going on for me, and this was a challenging time, the beginning of a dialogue. And so I think if you can deal with the present moment, you can begin to understand the past. One of the most important things is to learn to ask some clarifying questions. We talked about this in the assertiveness, the positive and negative inquiry. I'd really like to know more. Can you share a little bit more about what you mean by I wasn't professional in the clinic? Sometimes The person delivering the message thinks they're really as clear as could be. You weren't professional. Well, is that gum? Is that the pants? Is that the fact that you pulled your phone out? Like, what is it, right? And we all think we know, but we all come from different places, right? So what's professional for some people doesn't mean the same for others. So ask clarifying questions. Active listening skills, which we talked about last week, reiterating, if I heard you correctly, you are asking me to change the way I keep my notebook, or the way I prepare experiments, or how I bring data to you. So if I hear you correctly, you are asking. Now, sometimes people have data, but they have the wrong interpretation. So it's okay to say, could I share with you the context, or could I provide an explanation? Now, sometimes people will say, no, I just want that behavior to stop. I would say that's not a shining management moment. People should be able to explain the context. Sometimes the context is very, very important. But often you'll get a, sure, what was going on? Oh, okay, now let's talk about it. So those are some skills for understanding the past. Now, eventually we want the conversation to come to an end. For some, that will be very easy, right? If you're working with a reflective communicator, it might be a fast meeting. A directive communicator may be fast, but an emotive or an amiable could go on for a while. What do you think? What do you feel? You want to talk about it again? Let's go over it. I really want you to be okay. You know, don't worry so much, but really it would be good to change these things, right? Depending on which of those styles they are. It could go on for a while. You'll want to help bring it to an end. Could we talk a bit about what I should do differently? That is a great sentence. Could we talk a bit about what I could do differently? You can ask for suggestions. You can offer suggestions. I'm going to check in on Monday morning before I get started in case I'm off track on what's next. Yes, that would be great. Or maybe you're going to get no. I'd much rather you write it down and we'll meet about it. But you can offer suggestions. That builds your confidence. It shows you're engaged. It is fair for you to request a follow-up meeting to assure that you are meeting the mark. Not every manager will offer this. If you feel 2 weeks later you've been really changing and you'd like feedback, it's perfectly fine to either send an email to say, I've really been working on what we talked about. Could we meet to talk about it? If it's a simple little thing, I've really been working on it. Do you have any feedback by email? You know your PI better, whether an email or a meeting. If you have a standing meeting, could you bring it up then? You will know them better about when to do that. A couple of things is go back to self-awareness and make sure you know your stress response. There's a lot of physical signs that go on in the moment. Pay attention to the other person as well, right? If they're leaning forward and their energy is going up, that's a sign to you that you want to try to bring the energy down. Ask for time if you need it. Remember, there are a lot of overstatements, generalizations, and people who are stressed issue draconian pronouncements. You will never get this work published is an example of a draconian, announcement. Our BSc will be a disaster. We'll never get this work funded. There's a lot of draconian announcements. Why? Because the giver is stressed about their advancement in science, just like you are stressed about yours. Calm, clarifying questions, that is a learned skill. Please tell me more. Or can I just ask for a bit of a clarification? That can be incredibly intimidating in the heat of an argument. It can also help a lot. The best way to learn these skills is practice them in safer situations, in student groups, with lab mates, in the discussion groups, in various resilience skills groups that we teach here, in different things that universities offer around assertiveness and conflict. Remember that our feelings and the distorted stories we tell are not fact. So in the moment, we're screwed, this is going to be a disaster, is simply a thought in the moment. It is not a fact. Very, very often feedback lands on the receiver way worse than it was meant to land. And in general, there is so much about this that is about boundaries and about learning. And I wish that the deliverers of feedback did a much, much better job of helping with all of that by delivering feedback with some kindness and some caring and a sense of psychological safety. And I will keep working on that from my end. You work on that from your end by developing those skills. So when you mentor others, you are a role model for how to do this the right way. Our first response is often to shut down, disbelieve, become defensive, feel under attack. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn is hardwired into our nervous system. So it makes sense that that's going to drive us part of the way. I think the more that we learn about this and the more self-compassion we have around this and the more we debrief after feedback sessions to learn what helped us and what didn't. So there needs to be a lot of meta communication around feedback. Difficult feedback interactions will happen, and I could summarize this whole slide by saying seek support and guidance. The problem is after a difficult session, we hide. We feel shame, and we've talked a lot about how shame gets in our way, and we don't get enough support. Eventually, we have to revisit the situation, decide how to handle it, what parts of the feedback were accurate, what that session tells us about. And the flip side of all of this is you have to learn how to receive feedback, but ultimately, we are the change that we want to see, and we all have to learn to give feedback. We all need to learn also how to ask for feedback. So there are really multiple sides to all of this. I'm not going to talk a lot about giving feedback today. We have a mentoring course coming up that has a lot on giving feedback that should be released soon. We've touched on a little bit of it today, so I'm going to just end by talking about needing to ask for feedback. So because people are busy, they can avoid giving feedback. People who are reflective communicators can avoid giving feedback because it's just a part of their communication style. In labs where the hierarchy isn't very clear who should be giving the feedback, who's really mentoring and supervising you, there's a lot of times you may need to ask for feedback. We talked a lot about that last week when we talked about assertiveness. It is best to request a meeting by email to give them time to prepare, and I gave you a little bit of a script down there. I think one of the things that bothers students the most is not having enough feedback interactions early in their time. It's really hard to know if you're on the right track if you don't get a lot of feedback. And if all you get is vague appreciation feedback, oh, you're doing fine, it doesn't help either. So let's be honest, that's really not feedback. You're doing fine is not really feedback. So here are some things about asking for feedback. Now, giving feedback to your PI can be really challenging. It really depends on how open they are, how committed to mentoring you they are, what the status of the bridge is. If you generally have a supportive PI and you're not giving them some feedback, ask yourself what the internal barriers are and try to work with them. If you work with someone who you view as generally unsupportive, it's important to get some support and guidance before you decide on a way forward. You don't want to go in and give feedback to someone where there's not a very good relationship and where you're uncertain of your status. A mix of both. We all have our shining moments and our less than shining moments. Consider timing, consider approach. I will talk a lot about managing up next time. Sometimes the stakes are very high and ignoring problems do not make them go away. And some of us go right to fawn, fight, flight, freeze, and we land on fawn right away. And we tell bosses exactly what they want to hear. And while we're saying it, we already know inside that we don't agree with the words coming out. So we really, really need to think about giving feedback to PIs and getting the right support. There's 3 images I really like here. One is rain gear. You know, sometimes it's just intense at work and we got to put on our very best rain gear and we got to just get a little bit wet. All right. And now when I say that, I have this image of me in the middle of the Boundary Waters in massive rain, sitting there, hoping that I would be even remotely dry. But you know, the honest truth is that storm passed and we all came out of the woods and we were all fine and we all dried off. And I do not want anyone to feel that every day is that kind of intense deluge of challenge with our bosses and with people at work. But the honest truth is it happens now and again. So sometimes we got to put on our rain gear. We started talking about jackals, giraffes, and ostriches. This picture I took, it looks better here than it actually looks on my phone. You know, you got to be kind to yourself in all of this. Your responses are going to be, you know, challenging at times. The feedback you get is going to point out mistakes you wish you hadn't made. Like, we got to be kind. PIs and others delivering feedback have to remember to be kind in giving the feedback. And as you give feedback to friends and colleagues and others, remember that. And finally, I can't stress enough, relationship building matters a huge amount. So, you know, we all have to be focused on what types of relationships do we have in the workplace? What can we do to improve them? What can't we do, right? Even if we wish we could improve it, what is the reality that we're facing? Ultimately, that's a lot about what resilience is. So I often like to ask myself, are there things that I need to do around the bridge? Whether that's going and apologizing because I was a little bit more snarky than I wish to be, or checking in with someone, or going to lunch with folks, because every once in a while we got to focus on just enjoying each other. Who knows? But what's the status of the bridge? There are some journaling prompts, and I love all 3 of these books. I know I recommended books other times, and as I said, those of you walking to this building so that I do not have to lecture alone, you all get a book. Uli or I will be around to help you, or you can just tell Jalen, who sits at the desk, Sharon said I could have a book. I can't believe she will question you. But if she does, just say, you know, check with her or Uli. The next discussion groups are Tuesday, November 12th. They are in person. There are virtual ones, and there is a virtual discussion group for trainees who identify as neurodiverse. Uli kindly gave us the link. She will be emailing all of you. And with that, it is almost dark. So, wow, the clock has changed. Not fun, but everybody have a good night. I am going to take questions. If there are any in the room, I'll start with that. And if not, I'll take questions on Zoom. So first in the room, I'll see you later. Take care. All right, anybody? All right, so I'll take some here. Might it be easier for those who prefer one style to adapt to using the others, especially for neurodiverse individuals? For some, it can be very difficult to match an expressive if you're an analytical. Absolutely. None of this is easy. We all have a go-to style that is easy for us, and all the rest of them are a challenge. And the context of the challenge for each of us differs, right? Depending on all kinds of factors about who we are, the cultural baggage that we have around how people interpret styles and identities, differences in first language in communities we grew up in. Neurodiversity can add to the challenge. Imposter fears alone, without all these other things, can add to the challenge. None of this is very, very easy to do. And I'm not saying that it should be equally easy all around that grid. I'm just saying that all of us can make small changes to use as many styles as possible. How do we determine the style we have? I feel that I'm a blend of some of these. Is there a resource and or, well, the word test, I'll use assessment to find our style. There is actually an assessment online. I find that the easiest way to do that is to journal a little bit, to look at them. Some of us are a blend. A lot of people say it's really two of them. The other way to do that, if you're really challenged, is to start with which ones are you not? And sometimes that's the best entree in. Is it worth it to ask someone how they like to receive feedback, or is it too much to be mindful of my own communication style and someone else's? I think that the very, very best mentors have a discussion about feedback, and they talk a little bit about their style, and they ask some open-ended questions about what would be best for you. Maybe even something about how will I, I mean, I think about me, I could say, I can be a pretty strong communicator. How will I know if I have overdone it? And the reason I suggest that is because, so we eat, I think I've mentioned to many of you, we eat many, many nights with my in-laws. So the four of us eat together. And we have a signal when one of us is finding the whole thing sort of challenging. And that came because one of us would get frustrated, the end of the evening wouldn't go well, and then we'd go home and argue about it. Right? Why did you say this? Or why? Well, I got so frustrated. And now, right, we just say, well, it was a long night and we'd love to catch an episode of whatever we're watching. And that is a sign of gotta go. And I think that, I've seen PIs who've asked trainees to just go like this, right? It's just a reminder to people. I think it is incredibly respectful to have a discussion about how might I adjust my style for you. That said, we all going to have to give feedback in ways we don't like it at all. So we don't want to get caught in this, I can only get feedback one way, okay? So we want to be careful about that. What are the next steps in the event that the trust is broken? And there are possibilities of attributional ambiguity. The first step when we really feel there's no trust with a supervisor who is important to us is to seek guidance and advice from really committed mentors at your institution, graduate program directors, people in your postdoc office here at NIH, in your training office, in OITE. It's good to get advice from someone who is outside the situation, who can hear you, ask you if there's another perspective. Could you reframe that? Could there be misunderstandings? What was the intent versus the impact? People to help you. The second thing is, if you really are left with this compelling need to resolve the issue, is to say, I feel like we really need to have a conversation about this, and to go ahead and get started on that. How do you encourage others to be mindful of these communication differences and not to attribute it to immutable personality characteristics? Regular and ongoing leadership training, regular and ongoing coaching, regular and ongoing engagement in the OITE well-being program, whatever program is at your university. We all need constant reminders that we are not our best self when we are under stress. And let's be honest, I think we have had years of really big events in worlds, in our own communities and environments. I think a lot of us have been under chronic stress now for a while. And in some ways, science and healthcare are fields that drive constant stress. Even when we don't need to, we do, but sometimes there really is an amount of stress. So we are our worst caricatures of ourselves when we are stressed. I am fairly certain that what happened this morning partially happened because I spent about an hour doom scrolling and read the exact same article about polls in 20 different newspapers. So that by the time I had that conversation, I was already a tiny bit on edge. So we all need to be constantly engaged and working on this because we are all constantly at risk of hurting people that we really care about, or undoing a relationship that really matters to us, or doing less than stellar work when we're capable of doing more stellar work. Is it better to mirror the other person's communication style, or do complementary styles work better? How can we maintain authenticity while attempting to switch our style? So authenticity is being who we are generally in the moment, and true to who we are. We can be authentically who we are and pull back a little bit, or be a little bit more assertive. Authenticity would be completely and forever hiding who you were. I think flexing in the moment is not being inauthentic. That said, I do think there are times when somebody feels, I used to joke, people would say, "Oh, are you a scientist?" And I would say, "No, I just play one on TV." Probably a little bit of imposter fears, but also, a little bit of just, the honest truth is we all a little bit put a face on to go to work every day. We put a face on in all kinds of ways, right? We present some part of who we are, and not every part, and it depends on context and people and the boundaries and how we're feeling. I think you can be authentically who you are and still learn about communication styles and make adjustments. However, if I walked away from one interaction and said, "Well, I didn't quite feel like myself," I think I'd shrug my shoulders. But if there was somebody that I interacted with where I never, ever felt like myself, where I walked away and said I hid a whole lot of who I am, I would ask myself if that was the best long-term place for me. I mean, it's work. We all put on a work face to some degree. We just don't want it to completely obscure who we are, and we don't want it to feel exhausting all of the time. But some amount of flexing, I think, can be we can still be authentic and flex. I'm in a field of study that is new to me, and I'm primarily an analytical communicator under supervision of a driver. It is a very hard pairing, I have to say. To be the analytical who engages every day with a driver can be very challenging. I am struggling with knowing when to defer to their expertise, when they're telling me what to focus on and how to balance that. I often come away from meetings feeling steamrolled and discouraged about my own ideas. How can I be more assertive with this person when I am less confident and experienced? So first of all, I'm going to put out a phrase. People talk about striking while the iron is hot, right? And the iron is hot, you want to iron the clothes. When something happens, you want to give feedback right away. But actually, there's an equally valid thing called striking while the iron is cold, meaning when you're not upset and triggered and you're not in the heat of a moment, to go to someone and say, I mean, exactly what you said, I'm new and I'm trying to learn and do a good job and bring my expertise here to your group and learn from you. And because of communication style differences and the fact that I don't always have confidence, sometimes I'm finding it challenging to get feedback from you and ideas from you. And maybe it's a calm, positive moment and it's a really great conversation. Now, only you know your boss. I don't know enough about the situation to actually advise you to do that, but especially because you're new and you could be there a long time. You said postdoc, right? If this can't be corrected, you're going to be demoralized for years to come. So to me, it seems like it could be a huge benefit to try to strike while the iron is cold and express your needs for some different styles. Maybe it's a co-mentor. Maybe it's that you write some things out before a meeting. Maybe it's a change in the way you have meetings. Who knows what it is? But to me, given the high stakes of having a good experience, it is very worth having that discussion. I just wouldn't have it when your feelings are hurt, and I wouldn't have it in an intense period of time. So almost everyone in the room is gone. Almost everyone in Zoom is gone. And in a moment, we will all be gone. So hoping that we all have a good week. And I hope that we will see you in the groups. And the last lecture of the series is on the 12th of November. Oh, the 18th of November. Oh, the 18th of November. So we were committed to finishing this before Thanksgiving, and we will. So everybody take good care and be safe.